Empires do not collapse suddenly. That is the first lie history teaches. They do not fall the moment an enemy arrives. They do not end with one battle, one invasion, or one bad ruler. Empires collapse long before anyone notices, quietly, administratively, systematically. By the time the fall becomes visible, the system has already failed. What collapses first is not the army, not the borders, not the flag. What collapses first is the structure that holds everything together, and that structure is always the same. Every empire begins with momentum, expansion, confidence, control. Resources flow in, taxes are predictable. The population believes the system works. At this stage, the empire looks unstoppable, but hidden beneath the surface, a clock starts ticking. Because empires are not designed for balance, they are designed for growth, and growth always has a limit. At the start, empires expand faster than their costs. New land pays for new soldiers, new taxes fund new infrastructure, new subjects fuel production. This is the golden phase. The system rewards participation. People cooperate because cooperation pays, but expansion cannot continue forever. Eventually, borders harden, and when expansion stops, the real test begins. This is the moment where most empires fail, because their systems are built on assumptions that no longer apply. Revenue slows, costs remain, administration grows heavier, defense becomes more expensive. The empire does not shrink to match reality, it adapts by force. The first response is almost always financial. Raise taxes, debase currency, borrow from the future. These measures are presented as temporary, emergency solutions. They never are, because once a state discovers it can survive today by sacrificing tomorrow, it repeats the behavior again and again. This is how collapse really starts. Not with chaos, with policy. As taxes rise, productivity falls. Small producers are crushed. Wealth concentrates upward. Elites insulate themselves. The empire still looks rich, but that wealth is no longer circulating. It is locked, and locked wealth does not sustain systems. At the same time, money loses integrity. Coins are debased. Currency is diluted. Trust erodes. Inflation does not arrive as panic. It arrives as adjustment. Prices creep up. Wages lag. Confidence weakens. Most people don't protest. They adapt. An adaptation delays collapse while making it worse. Trade begins to slow. Long-distance commerce declines. Markets become local. Barter returns quietly. The empire still exists, but it is no longer liquid, and liquidity is life. To compensate, the state increases control. More regulations, more oversight, more enforcement. Bureaucracy expands to manage decline. But bureaucracy consumes resources, so costs rise further, and pressure increases again, always on the productive class. At this stage, the population feels something is wrong, but they cannot name it. The empire still has laws, still has soldiers, still has leaders, but participation no longer feels rewarding. People disengage, not rebelliously, economically. This is the moment loyalty begins to shift. Citizens stop defending the system, they tolerate it, and tolerance is not loyalty. The military is next, not because it weakens, but because it becomes unaffordable. Pay is delayed, supplies are reduced, recruitment declines. The state adapts again. Mercenaries, outsourcing, temporary solutions. Armies become transactional. They fight for pay, not for belief. At the same time, internal conflict increases. Elites fight over shrinking resources. Factions compete for control. Civil wars replace external wars. The empire burns energy inward. This is always fatal, because systems survive by expanding outward or stabilizing inward. They cannot fight themselves and survive. Now comes the illusion of reform. New laws, new leaders, new slogans. Everything changes on the surface. Nothing changes structurally, because real reform would require sacrifice from those in power, and empires never choose that willingly. The population feels abandoned. Infrastructure decays. Public services collapse. Security weakens. But taxes remain. This creates resentment without rebellion. The most dangerous state, because it produces apathy. History often mistakes this phase for stability. The empire still functions, but it is hollow, like a building with perfect walls and rotten beams. Eventually, pressure arrives from outside, an invasion, a migration, a rival power, and historians mark this moment as the fall. They are wrong. This is not collapse, this is exposure. The external threat does not destroy the empire. It reveals that the empire no longer defends itself. Cities open their gates, provinces defect, armies switch sides, not out of treason, out of logic. Why defend a system that no longer serves you? This is why empires fall quickly once decline becomes visible, because collapse is already complete internally. What follows is reorganization, not destruction. Look at history: Rome, the Abbasids, the Ottomans, the Spanish Empire, the British Empire. Different cultures, different eras, same pattern. Rome debased its currency, crushed producers, and lost trust. The Abbasids over-centralized, fragmented revenue, and collapsed administratively. The Ottomans lost monetary sovereignty and became financially managed. Spain flooded itself with silver and destroyed domestic production. Britain overextended, financialized, and withdrew. No empire escaped this cycle, because the mechanism is structural. Empires collapse when costs exceed productive capacity, money loses trust, control replaces cooperation, elites extract without reinvesting. Armies are symptoms, not causes. This is the most uncomfortable truth. Empires do not collapse because people attack them. They collapse because people stop believing in them. And belief is not ideological, it is economic. When participation no longer pays, systems lose defenders. When systems lose defenders, borders become irrelevant. When borders become irrelevant, collapse becomes visible. The final stage is not chaos, it is normalization. People adapt to a smaller world. Local economies replace global ones. New authorities emerge. Life continues, just without the empire. This is why most people living through collapse don't realize it. They believe it is temporary, a cycle, a crisis. They are partially right. It is a cycle, just not one that returns upward. Empires do not end. They dissolve into regions, into systems, into successors. Power does not disappear. It migrates. And here is the most important lesson. Empires never collapse because of a single mistake. They collapse because they refuse to stop making the same one, using the future to protect the present. This is why financial systems matter more than armies, because money coordinates belief, and belief coordinates cooperation. Once that breaks, no amount of force can restore it. History remembers collapses as dramatic endings. They are not. They are administrative failures revealed by pressure. The warning signs are always the same: rising debt, currency manipulation, elite insulation, public disengagement, militarization without productivity. These are not coincidences, they are prerequisites. Empires collapse when they stop rewarding value creation and start rewarding power retention. When systems exist to preserve themselves instead of serving their population. When control replaces trust. The tragedy is not that empires fall, it is that they always fall the same way. Despite having the evidence, despite knowing the pattern, despite studying the past, empires collapse because learning threatens power, and power always chooses survival today over stability tomorrow, until tomorrow arrives. This is not ancient history. This is not theory. This is the operating manual of civilization. Ignore it, and the cycle repeats. Understand it, and you see collapse coming long before the walls crack. Empires do not fall when armies lose. They fall when systems stop working. Everything else is just timing. If this video woke you up, drop a like and subscribe. New forbidden truth every single day. Turn on notifications, the next one might save your wealth. Comment the one thing you're doing right now to prepare. I read every single one.